Two recordings. We're ready to rock and roll. Welcome back in to the Fit Parent Podcast. I think within the next, before this one comes out, it will officially be the Fit Parent Podcast on platforms. So we'll stop just saying it, and it'll actually be that. Because we got logo. Amy's husband John did logo and gonna change it all around. I'm very excited about it. That was the thing on my call yesterday with Olivia, my assistant, who's fantastic. So I think we should have that ready to rock and roll by the time this one comes out.
That's exciting.
So, and we're also wrapping up. I have no idea what episode this is, but we're wrapping up our series on the building blocks of fat loss. So this is part 7, the one about cardio. It's not. So it's the one about cardio. I thought about this. It's the one about cardio relative to strength training, or I'm sorry, relative to fat loss. I think there's more about cardio that probably won't get into in this one in terms of the benefits of cardio, because we will talk about the benefits of cardio. We'll talk about them, but a little bit more through the lens of fat loss. But I want to talk about some of the other ones. But I have the idea to do a little bit of a deeper dive into cardio and heart health and all of the benefits that come from that with somebody who's maybe a little bit more of an expert in it than I. Like, there are people who have spent their careers doing this, Joel Jamieson or Alex Viada, like some of these guys who are bigger names in the industry. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get them on, but at some point I would like to have a guest come on to discuss some of the nuances of cardio as well in terms of heart health. And so that will be at some point, who knows when, but today we're going to dive into the cardio side of things as well. So as we have been doing, we are going to do why does cardio fall in this place in the hierarchy? Why is it important for fat loss? What are we talking about when we're talking about cardio? And then how do we actually go about executing, as we have been doing for this series? And then I was telling Amy before we hung in, we're going to do a little insert episode, and then we're going to kind of part 2 of this series will be the tools, the kind of soft skills that make all 7 of these things easier. So that's going to be coming down the pipeline pretty soon as well. So excited for that. So cardio. Let's dive in.
Dive in.
Dive in.
I am ready.
So first thing we want to distinguish or identify is really, what are we talking about when we're talking about cardio? How does it distinguish itself from movement versus strength training, etc.? And so we talked about movement really in the sense of just like regular movement throughout the days. That can include walking, not necessarily speed, but like walking, but just doing stuff, picking up your kids, doing that sort of thing. Moving and being active just in your day-to-day life. Strength training, again, we talked about that distinguishes itself from working out with weights. Okay. Mm-hmm. Cardio is really a generic term that encompasses a lot of things. And so we want to kind of break down the different components of it and what is it that we're trying to accomplish. But this is really where we talk about, this is exercise. Again, going back to our analogy from last episode with the strength training piece of it, about making money while you sleep versus the money you make in your 9 to 5. Cardio is the money you make in your 9 to 5, right? This is oftentimes the calories that you burn are the calories that you burn in terms of fat loss. Okay, so through the lens of fat loss, why is this number 7 on the list? It's because it is, you're going to only burn the calories that you're going to burn during it for the most part, right? There's some post or exercise post oxygenation consumption, right? Like there is for strength training, but it's not nearly as much. Sometimes a little bit more if you do something that's a little bit higher intensity, but you can't do that as much. So, you burn a little bit fewer calories during it, but maybe, it ends up kind of being a wash, right? So like if I'm doing a HIIT work, like a true HIIT workout for 10 or 15 minutes, I might burn 150 calories during it and then another 100 calories in the 24 hours afterward versus if I did just like a slow jog on the treadmill for 40 minutes, I might burn the 250 calories during those 40 minutes, but then I don't really burn anything afterwards. So it ends up kind of in a wash, the calories that you burn. So again, thinking about the two sides of the equation, this is in the calories out portion of the fat loss equation that we've been talking about. If you haven't listened to, I totally skipped over where this is 7. We should talk about that. If you haven't listened to parts 1 through 6, I don't know what you're doing here, but listen to parts 1 through 6 and why this is there. But again, the hierarchy of importance in terms of fat loss, real quick: calorie deficit, protein, fiber, sleep, daily movement / walking, strength training, and now onto cardio. Probably should have done that earlier. This is why I'm not a professional.
That's okay. If they're here for part 7, they needed to have listened to 1 through 6. So
that's the hope. If you haven't already, you should go listen to parts 1 through 6. But so why is this so much lower than the movement side of things, walking? Because that is also a fixed calories out portion of it. There are 2 to 3 main. I want to start kind of, I don't know if negative is the right word, but I want to start kind of on the things to like, why is it this low? And then we'll spend the rest of the time celebrating cardio for what it is. Okay. So why is it this low? Some of the drawbacks to cardio with relation to everything else. And we talked about this during the walking episode as well. One is it's not as low barrier to entry as walking is, right? I could stand up from this desk, go outside and walk, or just walk around my house. I did in the clothes that I'm wearing. Earlier today, I had a 20-minute window. I just got up and I walked the cul-de-sac that I live on, just walked in circles for 20 minutes, listening to a podcast as I prepared for this one, like listening to somebody talk about cardio. Like that's easy enough to do. Versus if you're going to go do cardio, you oftentimes put on athletic gear and shoes, and you have to, whether you're going to go outside and run, if you're going outside to run, you don't have as much control over the terrain or weather or things like that. If you're inside and you're using a piece of cardio equipment, you either have to have it in your house or have access to it at a gym, go to the gym, right? Lower barrier to entry for walking. That is one. 2 is, or things to be maybe aware of when it comes to cardio, is it can be, depending on how you do it, and we're going to talk about how to do it well, depending on how you do it, it can impact your recovery from your strength training / impact your ability to push yourself during your strength training, which we talked about. That has a little bit more bang for your buck in terms of fat loss. Not dramatically, but it can, but also, injury sort of thing. Things to be aware of. Now, you can do it to the point where it doesn't impact it too much, but you want to just be aware of how that works. The biggest challenge that I find with cardio that people can get into, and we talked about this with the walking episode again, is the psychology side of it, which is I go for a run. It's very easy for me to get into the I earned this food sort of thing.
Right.
Right. And give myself kind of a pass on that / just be more hungry. So I literally was having this conversation yesterday with a former client of mine, Laura, who started running more, and she's fantastic. And she was like, are there any downsides to this? That was her thing. She's like, I'm getting into running. I'm enjoying it. I'm really liking it. Would like to maybe run, a 5K. She's like kind of a former athlete, like likes to be competitive. And I'm like, yeah, are there potential downsides to this in terms of fat loss? And I said, the only 2 that I would be concerned about, I'm not concerned about for her as much the psychology side of it, like, I'm going to get into I earned this, but it is the like hunger piece of it. Like the physiological response of hunger might make it hard for you to maintain your calories, basically. So, now, we talked about this with walking. If I go run and I burn 200 calories and then I come back and I eat the 200 calories, if you like the running, right, that's just kind of a wash. Now, if you go run and you burn 200 calories, you come back and you eat 300 calories, right? That was a net negative in terms of your calorie deficit, or 500 calories or whatever it is in terms of your hunger levels. But just like with walking, if I can increase my calories out without increasing my calories in, right? If I can go for a run and that not necessarily impact my hunger, or I can maintain my hunger piece of it, that is something that can be a net positive for me because I'm increasing the calories outside of the equation, right? There's the two pieces of it. And if I can increase that delta, that difference between the calories and calories out, I'm going to expedite my process. This can be particularly helpful for people who have a lower BMR, which we talked about earlier, that basal metabolic rate, which is the calories that you burn just by existing. These are people who are typically smaller individuals. If you're shorter, this is what we talked about when we did the episode on why it's harder for women to lose weight, right? We typically burn less calories than a 6'4" former basketball player just by existing. And so if you're like, I can't really force myself down much lower in my calories eating wise, like I can't get myself to eat much less than whatever 1,500 calories or something like that, which is understandable. Like that's not a lot of food.
Yeah.
Like, but you're
Yeah.
like, I'm not real. Like I kind of need to be there. If I have a 5'1", 130-pound woman who wants to be 120, which is not like a ridiculous number for somebody who's 5'1", for them, they'd have to eat 1,400 calories sort of thing, depending on where they're at in order to get there. And that's just not a lot of food. And so if you can increase the calories outside of things, just like you can with the walking or, whatever, then that can help you to be able to eat a little bit more food and maintain that same deficit. Now, the question is like, does it make a big difference to do walking versus running during that period of time? Like, am I getting much more? And that was what we talked about, why walking is there higher, because the difference is not huge, right? If I go for a 40-minute walk versus a 40-minute run, the difference is, it depends on the person, depends on a lot of different factors, but could be 50 to 100 calories, right? It's not like, holy smokes, what a game changer, but it's not nothing. It's not nothing. But the main thing that we want to think about, and this will be the biggest portion of it, so I'll circle back to this. The benefits of going for a run versus going for walking go beyond fat loss. That's really what it's going to come down to and what the bulk of this episode is going to be. Cardio is a fairly inefficient method for fat loss, but it is an outstanding way to improve your health. And not everything is about fat loss. Though this series is, which is why we're talking about it in this way, it is the benefits of cardio for your health far outweigh the benefits of cardio for fat loss. That's where I'll say. So, can you go for a run to increase the calories out? Absolutely. The other thing that I told Laura when I was talking to her, and is a factor in this, is the commitment, time commitment, and consistency portion of it. So, as a for instance, busy person, as we all are, right? And I can get, try to do 3 or 4 workouts in a week, but then I'm like, okay, I want to do cardio as well. Now we're pushing it to 5 or 6 days a week, or I do it at the end of my workout. And now my workout changes from 40 minutes of strength training into an hour and 20 minutes with cardio, or I'm adding a couple of extra days. The question comes down to, can I stick with this long enough to reap the benefits of it? And that's where it always comes down to. You're better off underreaching and overachieving and then adding than the other way around, right? Overreaching and under-delivering. And so we don't want to get into a place where we say, okay, I'm going to do 6 days a week of working out. I'm going to do 3 days of strength training and 3 days of cardio, or 4 days of strength training and 2 days of cardio. If you're not doing anything, or if you're really 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 consistent with 3 days of working out, like, is there going to be a gigantic leap to go from 3 to 4, especially if I'm not sure I can do it? Because again, getting the bonus fourth or fifth workout in is great, but psychologically, going 3 for 3 is better than going 3 for 4.
Mm-hmm. You
Even
feel
if
like
you're getting the same amount in. Go ahead.
it feels like you've succeeded, that you've checked the box. If you leave
Yes.
that one undone, then you're like, well, I suck. So
Yeah.
I will just
It's
stop.
it's a matter of expectations versus delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to get into a place where we're living up to our expectations and
Right.
feeling like we have more in the tank. And so that's the only other thing that I was like, hey, listen, you're for her, as an
Mm-hmm.
example, she was really, really consistent with 4 strength training days.
Mm-hmm.
Like super consistent with it. We were at 3, she was up at 4, she was crushing 4, and she was like, I'm waking up and I'm running 4 or 5 days a week in the
That's
morning. And
fantastic.
like, and she's doing it with some other ladies, like she's doing like a Zoom thing and
Yeah.
whatever. And she's like, I like it. And I'm like, that's great. And she's doing that in the morning and she's working out a little bit later. And I'm like, listen, if you have the time to do that, by all means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think you can stick with it. But it's if you can't see yourself doing it for too long, then at some point you're gonna not be doing it and you're gonna feel bad even if you made the conscious choice not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're better off being like, oh, I've done 2 days a week for 6 months versus I did 5 days a week for a month and then
Yeah.
didn't. Because you're gonna be like, why am I not running anymore? Like, I couldn't stick with the running thing.
Yeah.
So there is something to that. And then I kind of slightly mentioned it here, but there is, and we talked about this when we were talking about walking as well, there's a point of diminishing returns in this in
Mm-hmm.
terms of life balance piece of it, right? Like going from 12,000 steps to 15,000 steps a day, there's a benefit to it,
Mm-hmm.
100%. But at some point, is that extra half an hour of walking, could that be better used elsewhere in your life from a general life perspective? Because we're not just our bodies, right? We're not just a physical being. We have social and emotional and spiritual and all these types of things. Like, how could I better? Is there a better way for me to spend these 30 minutes that's going to overall help my life and well-being? And I don't know that answer for everybody, because for some people it is a stress management and whatever it is, but you have to, like, I know that for you Saturday mornings cardio, and for my wife Megan that is for her too. It's like, this isn't about the physical. This is
It's
about
not that.
this is
Yeah.
about like doing the combat on Saturday morning is a stress reliever. It's like therapy. It's whatever it
And
is.
it's social. It's where, like, my group of girls, we
Yeah,
get together every Saturday and do it. I mean, the exercise for me is secondary to the
100%.
just having fun while I'm there. My
Yeah.
my exercise happens Monday through Friday.
Yeah. So that's where you can get to, right? And so you always want to ask that question of, more is not necessarily more.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a point where my time would be better spent elsewhere? Um
Mm-hmm.
Even, if you want to talk about it physically, like if you're not doing numbers 1 through 6 here, 30 extra minutes of cardio is not gonna make up for the fact that you're not in a calorie deficit. So if you're having a hard time getting enough protein in, use that 30 minutes to like cook protein
Yeah.
versus go for a run. Like, that's a better use of your time. Use
Yeah.
those 30 minutes to sleep a little bit more. Use those 30 minutes to but even beyond that, like to play with your kids
Yeah.
or read a book or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's a point of diminishing returns with these things. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I come from there. So those are the reasons why it places at the lowest on the rung. However, it is still part of, right? It is not off the charts things that you don't matter, right? Because this is the hierarchy of fat loss, But there are things that are not on the hierarchy of fat loss. Like, notice that nowhere on here is supplementation, right? Notice that nowhere on here is, can't think of another, whatever, vitamins, or, I guess that's supplementation, or juice cleanses, or, cold
We talked
plunges.
about it
Oh, that's a
yesterday.
thing. Oh, okay. I'm going to go off for a second.
Cold
Oh,
plunges?
I'm going
Have
to go
you
off
done
for.
one?
I've never done one.
Well, it sounds terrible.
No desire whatsoever to do cold, but I'm going to get opinions on whether or not, like, I can see the psychological benefits to it. The physical benefits, the jury is still a little bit out on it. Anecdotally, I have a lot of people who I talk to who are like, you know what, it makes me feel great. And I'm like, go for it. Like, by all means. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not.
We gotta hope Mark Wahlberg is not watching or listening, because he does.
There are so many. There are so many people who. But listen, I don't care about it. What I do care about is there's misinformation coming out. So, like, literally, I've seen this clip 7 times in the last 3 days. So there's a guy, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to call him out because you guys should know who this guy is. There's 2 people in the fitness industry who are the lowest of the low. You can kind of talk about Liver King, but I think everybody knows that he's obnoxious. If you haven't heard of Liver King, you're lucky. But the 2 people who will hide behind their degrees and sound like they know what they're talking about, but are the worst of the worst, are a guy named Paul Saladino, not to be confused with Don Saladino, who is fantastic, right? Paul Saladino, who's hides behind his MD, which is in like pharmacology or something like that. And he's the one who came out and was like, the oatmeal is bad for you. When I did that post about
I hate that guy.
And vegetables are bad for you. So that guy's worse. And rapidly taking the crown from him is a guy named Gary Brecka. And Gary Brecka's thing has come out, and I've seen this clip on, I think it was Joe Rogan's podcast, which is the worst because Joe Rogan's podcast is like one of the biggest in the world. Yeah. And so a bunch of people are hearing, and Joe Rogan's also not the peddler of the best information in the world. He just kind of lets people come on and say whatever the hell they want. Yeah. But Gary Brecka did a whole thing about there is nothing more effective for fat loss than getting in a cold tub for 3 minutes. And I just want us, like, let's just take a pause. If that sounds stupid to you,
it sounds ridiculous.
It's because it is. In the same way that Paul Saladino saying that vegetables are bad for you and that oatmeal is bad for you, Gary Brecka saying that getting in a cold tub is the best thing you can do for fat loss, more than monitoring your nutrition. Literally said this. So this is where I want to just encourage anybody who's listening to remember 2 things. One, if something sounds ridiculous, it probably is. And secondly, most people on the internet are not in the helping people business. Mm-hmm. They're in the attention-getting business.
Correct.
And saying things that everybody believes is true are not true gets attention, regardless of... This is a guy who has stood up and said, I'm going to teach you more about your thyroid than whatever a thyroid doctor is learned in 6 years of medical school in 3 minutes. Like, the arrogance of it, right? This is that level of human being who preys on people's insecurities to sell his own crap.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a little aside. I don't know how I got on that, but notice that cold plunges are not on the hierarchy. Okay.
No,
that was the whole point.
They're not.
Because they don't have any bearing on it.
No.
They don't have any bearing on it. Can you do cold plunges?
Are they cool? Sure.
Go for it.
Do they do different things for your circulatory system? Possibly, but they're not gonna make you drop fat.
Given the choice, I will say this last little bit. Given the choice for your health, which one was going to have more effect on you, there is significantly more research about getting into a sauna versus getting into a cold tub. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that there's not benefits, but there is tons of peer-reviewed, long-standing research on the benefits of saunas, and saunas don't suck. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, saunas are kind of
I personally don't care for them, but it's because I don't
You don't
like to get
have
hot.
to care, but like they're it's not as bad as getting into a cold tub.
Oh God, no! I
Like
have sat in a sauna. I
you
will do it.
you
We
may
have
not
peer pressure.
love a sauna, but like you get into a sauna and get a little sweaty versus getting into a cold tub and like have to like or a cryo chamber and have to like cover your fingers so
Well,
that you don't lose them. Like, what are we doing here?
what this it all makes me think of, it's 2023. We look back at the videos of like fitness trends from the 1940s and 50s,
Yeah.
where it was like that machine that women would stand on, and it like had a big giant rubber band that wrapped around your butt and shook it. And
Hmm.
at the time, that was being touted by all of these same experts in their field as this is the way to a trim waist. It didn't work. You were standing there having your butt jiggled. It doesn't do anything. So I think in another 60 years, we're going to look back at this guy and
Yeah.
whatever he's spouting and be like,
Oh,
well,
we're
he's an
doing it in
idiot.
the next 3, but yeah, this is but like or the waist belts. You remember the waist belts, the like the ab
Mm-hmm.
belts that you like Velcro
Oh, you just
on and you
put
turn
your
them on and
forehead
it
and just like
vibrates
sat and watched.
and then you take it off and everybody has a six pack underneath. It
Yes,
went
I
from a
remember
beer
the
gut to a
commercials.
six pack, right? Those are not on the list.
Because they're not real. I mean,
Those
anything
are
that they sell in Sky Mall is not going to work.
so, but the point of all of that is cardio is part of the equation. It
Yes.
is. It is just picking in the order of importance. It's going to be at the bottom of the order of importance, but that does not mean make it unimportant.
Right.
So now I want to get into the benefits of cardio. Because again, the benefits of cardio, we talked about some of them are you're increasing your in terms of fat loss, increasing your calories out.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that thing, you can achieve a good deal of that via walking.
Correct.
You can achieve the vast majority of it via walking. However, this is where we're going to kind of get away from a little bit from the fat loss piece of it and talk about there is more to life than fat loss. So this is where I coach people with fat loss. It's what I do. I've said for people for a long time. I posted about it 2 days ago. It is not vain. And I had a conversation with a person yesterday who said the exact same thing that 90% of people I've ever had a conversation with have said to me. I feel silly. I feel vain. This feels like a vanity conversation, but I just want to look better and feel better.
It's not vain.
It is not vain. It's not silly. It's silly to pretend that that's not what you want when it's what you want. Okay. And maybe we have a bigger conversation about this. I think that we could do a whole episode about this. So I don't want to get too far down that path. But what I am going to say is I'm not saying that fat loss is not a valid goal, but I'm also willing to bet that everybody who has fat loss as a goal, secondarily, adjacently, however you want to call it, also has health as a goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll say that, right? I'd like to be healthy, particularly if you have kids. Like even you and I, when we first had a conversation, the main driver for you, like the pain point, like if I could point my finger at it and take it away, the main one was I want to feel good in my clothes, in a bathing suit, be able to go swimming with Emerson.
My kid.
Right? That was number one. Like I could give you the best health in the world, but if that was still there, it would still be like, this isn't quite it. Okay.
Yeah.
That does not mean that right alongside that, and there were still tiers related to this, which was I want to be around for Emerson for the long term. I want to meet her kids. I want to play with them on the floor. I want to, whatever, right? All of those are mine, right? Like I've said, like since I have had kids, top 2-3 thing about having kids is watching my parents and my wife's parents play with my kids.
Yes.
It's one of the coolest things to see my parents do it. And to like see my dad get down. Like it's one of my favorite pictures when they came over for dinner and my dad is sitting like right here. I'm sitting in this chair and he's sitting and my oldest Levi builds what he calls a nest, just piles stuffed animals around my dad. And then my daughter comes up to him and brings him a book and he's reading a book to her. And then my other son is over here like kind of just meandering around, and then will like run. He does a thing where he just like runs up and like collapses on you and then laughs and then gets up and runs away and just like does that over and over. So the three of them there, just like sitting there having that moment, I'm like, that's about as cool as it gets. Okay, so
Mhm.
health is, I think, a goal for the vast majority of people listening to this. So
Mhm.
I will say this: for your health, living a long time, feeling good, not just I feel good in my skin, but like feeling good doing things,
Mhm.
like the ability
Mhm.
to have energy and keep up with your kids and be the parent. So I'm gonna have a minute.
Have a minute.
The one of the things that's most heartbreaking that I've heard, and I've heard it multiple times, and I feel it too. I think we all feel it. Is I'm not the mom, I'm not the dad that I thought I would be.
Mhm.
And now we have sometimes unrealistic expectations for ourselves, but oftentimes it's like it's not that I don't have the willingness to do it, it's that I don't have the physical capacity to do what it is that they want to do.
Mhm.
And I think we talked about this in the walking episode. And I said this yesterday. Oh man, we're getting off of the but it's coming back. So it's December 1st as we record this episode. So Christmas is coming up. And I had this thought like looking around the room because we're thinking about all right, what are we going to get for the kids? And looking around the room at the gifts we got them last year. And the most expensive gift that we got them, I don't know if you can see it. It's right behind me here. This little kitchenette.
The kitchen set.
This kitchen set, which was not like we didn't get a wicked, like there are $500 kitchen sets, right? We got like the $110 one because that was the cheapest one that was, but they never play with this thing. It's literally
Oh.
just a storage space for the food toys that they actually do play with.
Yeah.
Like they'll take out the food toys and they'll just like throw them at each other. They're not playing with them as food. They're just like semi-soft objects that they throw and dump and categorize by color. It's so we will spend significant amounts of money on our kids, and some of the things that we got they play with still, right? Not denying that, but we'll spend significant amounts of money on our kids for things that they don't necessarily want to play with,
Mhm.
when at least our kids are still at the age where the thing that our kids actually want to play with most is us,
Mhm.
and we won't invest in us becoming a better play thing for our kids,
Mhm.
having more energy, more endurance, more capacity to be present with them. So this is why I called the Facebook group the Fit and Present Parent Community, or when I first did when I was just working with dads, or why this podcast was originally called the Dependable Dad Podcast. The idea
Mhm.
was to be able to count on you, to be able to be the dad, be the mom that you always thought you would be, to be present, to do the thing, Like my son comes up and he's like, daddy, let's play chase. Like, will you chase me? All he wants to do is just run laps around. Like, I don't even have to actually, I'm like kind of sort of running and not even really doing anything. Like, if I'm just moving, he'll just like run after me for 20 minutes and have a
Mhm.
ball, and all the other
Mhm.
kids will do it. And but then like they'll want to carry, I'm like, I'm running with the twins, and what I mean, and they would do that forever. We could have no toys in the house, they would do that forever.
Mhm.
And my ability to do that is dependent on me taking care of myself.
Mhm.
And this is where it goes beyond just fat loss. Because when we get to the latter half of this hierarchy, walking, strength training, and cardio, I cannot tell you which one of those things individually takes the cake in terms of your overall health. I think they all have an important role to play. I don't think that any one of them should be neglected in favor of the others. I think that they all have their place. Again, I think that you can get a lot of the benefits of cardio from strength training, but not all of them. And so now we're going to get into a little bit of the science of it. And you can get some of the benefits of cardio from walking, but not all of them.
Mm.
So for your health, cardio is essential. It's essential.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends in the industry, his name is Anthony Pluff. I've had him on the podcast. I think he said this on the podcast, but he said, cardio's for the kids.
Mm. Oh, I like that.
Strength training's for you. Walking's for you. Nutrition, all of that's for you to some degree. Cardio's for the kids. Be able to keep up, because all I want to do is run. All I want to do is run. Mm-hmm. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about cardio. So first thing I want to... Jeez, 35 minutes in. We're crushing.
I know, like 30. Woo,
we're doing good. We're doing good. We're closer to the end than we think. All right. So a couple kind of myths I want to dispel from the beginning. One, fasted cardio. If you've heard of fasted cardio is a little bit less of a trend now, but it was a very, very big trend not very long ago. But it's the idea that you do your cardio first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, with the mindset being you have no food in your stomach, basically. So you're using fat as fuel. And that is 100% accurate. You are using fat as fuel. But burning fat and losing fat are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because I can use fat as fuel, but then if I eat it all back, it doesn't really matter, right? Yeah. I can burn the fat that I've eaten, or I can burn the fat that I've stored. It matters. It matters not. It comes back to that calorie deficit equation. So there's nothing magical about fasted cardio. Now, my wife, for instance, does not enjoy running with food in her belly.
Same. I can't.
Or doing combat, like on Saturday. Like, doesn't eat anything before she goes. That's fine. Mm-hmm. If it's a preference thing, go for it. From a logistical perspective, if waking up early and doing your cardio makes the most sense, well, you save yourself some time and you just wake up and you can wake up and stretch a little bit and go run, versus I got to wake up and then I got to eat and then I got to digest, which was what my routine was when I was strength training in the mornings, because I didn't feel great strength training on an empty stomach. I would bonk 20 minutes in. And so when I was working out before school, when I was teaching, I would wake up at 4, I would have breakfast, and then I would kind of get all of the other things ready for the day, do a quiet time. I would pack the lunches. I would, take the dog out. I would do all the things. And then I would go downstairs and I'd work out at 5 to 6, come up, and then I'd just shower, get dressed, and leave by 6:30. So that was my routine because I had to have some food in me. But when I wasn't strength training, if I did cardio some mornings, I could wake up and I could just have a half a banana and go downstairs and go, because it felt better. So nothing magical about fasted cardio. If you want to do it, great. Is it going to be that much more effective than non-fasted cardio? Not at all. It's going to be 0% more effective than non-fasted cardio.
Yeah.
You could make the argument. You could make the argument that it's actually going to be less effective because you're not going to be able to go as hard because you don't have as much fuel in the tank.
Yeah. I've always been of the, I'm never hungry until 9 or 10 every day.
Yeah.
But I go to the gym at 8 because that's when I have time to go. So I think at this point, my body's we're just going to figure it out. We figured out when you work different. Out, it's fine.
And we've talked about this before. I think we talked about it in the nutrition thing. There's nothing magical about meal timing. Eat with a timing and a frequency that makes sense for you. Megan doesn't love eating big breakfast.
Yeah.
Like if
I'm the
she has
same.
anything, she has like a little protein bar, like a light yogurt or a shake or something like that. And then she has a decent sized lunch at 11 or 12 or something like that. And then she has a
Yeah.
decent sized dinner. And that's what works for her.
Mhm.
For me, I'm
Mhm.
hungry the second I wake up.
Mhm.
I ate 50 minutes ago and I'm hungry right now. I've been hungry
I ate
for,
what time is it? 1 o'clock. I ate 2 hours ago, and I can still feel it in my
yeah,
like throat.
I ate like like steak, sweet potatoes, and broccoli at
Oh,
11:45.
I had steak, broccoli, and red peppers.
There you
We're like
go.
the same person.
Same human being. But literally, and I'm hungry now. So like I have to steer into that. And so but now we're getting into that.
Yeah.
Second thing, hit not more effective than regular cardio. So now we're
Mhm.
going to get into what is hit. What are we talking about when we're talking about cardio? Okay. So this is where we talk about the zones, heart rate zones for cardio.
Yes.
Okay. And so I don't want, again, this is where I'm not going to get too into the science of this because I think that there are better people to talk about it than me. And I also don't want to get too heady on it. But the idea, and again, there's nothing magical about this. You can look it up. There's the calculators for your heart rate zones. If you just like Google heart rate zone calculator, you can do it. It's based on your age, but those are not always accurate, right? Just like a calorie calculator, the calories times 12, right, isn't always accurate because everybody fluctuates. Okay, so but generally, zone one would be like walking. Zone one, you're going for a walk. Okay,
Mhm.
it's the idea of like you can carry on a conversation, not really sweating. There it is. Okay. Zone two, it's like kind of recovery to just above recovery. Zone two is kind of a light jog type thing. Like you could have a conversation. You're probably sweating a little bit, but you're not like. So I was doing the, like if you're trying to do that thing, right? Now we've raised into zone three. So
Yeah.
literally talking is a good barometer. Like if you were running in zone two and you were on the phone, somebody might know that you're working out, but you would still
Mhm.
be able to have a phone call.
Right.
Okay. Like it wouldn't be like you just can't really do it. Zone three is where a lot of people, if they're like gonna go run like, all right, I'm gonna go run 3-4 miles, run a 5K or something like that. You're
Mhm.
probably in zone three for most of that because you're
Mhm.
probably pushing yourself a little bit more. Okay. Zone four would be like it's actually probably easier to work backward from zone five here. So zone five is like all out sprint, like
Mhm.
maximum effort. You cannot really do zone five for more than 10 or 15 seconds. 20 if you're
Mhm.
like a all-time athlete. So the 100-meter dash is zone five. A short lift, right? Like I'm gonna do like when we do in glute camp, like I'm gonna do
Yeah.
5 reps of really heavy stuff. That's maximum effort.
Yeah.
So
I
the
can't challenge you on that.
anaerobic, right? Like that, it's anaerobic and then alactic is the fancy word for it. You don't typically get lactic acid buildup during that because you don't go for long enough. Zone four would be anaerobic but lactic, where you start to get a little bit of a burn. So this could be, again, it's easier to do this via racing, like the 400 or the 800-meter race. Like if you've ever run a 400-meter race, you kind of go about as hard as you can, and then at some point you hit a wall, like, and you actually like see, if you ever watch a 400 people, you see people hit that wall unless they're an Olympian, where they like all of a sudden slow down and their legs fill up with lactic acid and they're kind of like they feel heavy, but you have
It
to kind
looks
of
like
keep
they're moving
going,
cement.
and
Yeah.
you can keep going with that heart rate level, but your muscles start to fatigue.
Yeah.
Zone four is when people think about hit, right? They kind of think about the zone four sort of things where you have to kind of push through the challenge level piece of
Mhm.
it. But the challenge with hit is you can't do it for long.
Mhm.
If you're doing it appropriately, you can't do it for long. So you say, all right, I'm going to go do an hour-long hit class. Well, you're not able to do zone four for an hour. You just cannot do it.
Mhm.
So you might be in the room for an hour, but how much of that time are you actually working to that level? Is the question. And there's nothing wrong with HIIT, ton of value, but you get a lot of the same benefits doing HIIT as you do from strength training. So there's really two components to cardio and heart health, right? So cardio is primarily for your heart health, cardiovascular, right? Heart and lung capacity. So there are two things that your heart does, right? It contracts, the muscles around your heart contract, and they expand, just like all the other muscles in your body. The expansion or the eccentric, right? Or the concentric contraction. The contraction, how hard your heart contracts, is mostly strengthened through heavy weightlifting and HIIT cardio. They basically do the same thing. So that doesn't mean that HIIT is not great. Zone 4, you get a little bit of the cardio effect, but you get a lot of that same cardio effect if you were to do strength training in the way that we talk about, where you group together a couple of exercises. You're basically kind of doing the value of HIIT that way.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that if you want to do HIIT, by all means, go for it. But you're getting a lot of what's the actual amount of time that you're working. It's usually at a minimum like a 1 to 2 ratio, like work to rest, like 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off kind of thing. Like that's usually a minimum for like truly getting into zone 4. You might even get a little bit, have to do more rest than that, depending on how hard you're pushing. And where you are in your cardio level. So that's the concentric part of it. Sorry for that background noise.
Okay.
The eccentric part of it is how much it expands to then contract again. So the way to think about this is like a bike pump. I heard this analogy today from Alex Viada, and I loved it. So if you think about a bike pump, all right, the contraction is like how hard you're pushing down on the bike pump. The eccentric is how far you pull up and then push down. Okay. So if you only ever just do short little bursts, right, it's going to take you a long time. And if you only ever just do big, long things, but you don't really push down very hard, you're also not going to get as much out of it. The way to get the most out of it is a big expansion and then a hard contraction. So we do need both for your heart health. Strength training does help your heart health. And you get some of the contraction piece of it through doing different variations of cardio, but not the same as if you're doing strength training, the contraction piece. And you get some of the expansion capability from doing strength training, and you get some of it from walking. But the way you're going to get the most of that is through that zone 2 cardio place. And the reason why that one tends to live the best is, one, you're getting that expansion. 2, you can do it fairly like for a longer period of time. Like you can't do zone 3 for super, super long without resting. Like it's some, unless you're a high level athlete, but usually your zone 3 changes with how efficient your heart is working. It's challenging to do that for I'm going to do 35 minutes of zone 3 cardio. Like that's pretty tough to do because you're going to need breaks. You're going to need breaks. Like when you're talking about body combat, that's zone 3 for the most part, with a little bit of zone 4 and a little bit of zone 2, but you live mostly in your zone 3. If you were to check your heart rate, that's probably where you're living, somewhere in the
pretty mid-high.
120s ish. For you,
maybe a bit higher.
Yeah, 120. It's like 125 to 140, I think, ish for you right now. So depend, and you're gonna have some below and you're gonna have some above, but you can't really do that for super, super long.
Oh God, no.
And the same idea is true for HIIT. You can do that for even less, zone 4. So zone 2 you can do for a longer period of time. It's like kind of a light jog, or like I'm breathing and maybe you get a little bit of sweat, but I could do that for a pretty solid period of time. It's lower impact. Like you're not going to end up with any sort of real muscle fatigue usually. So this is going back to the recovery part of the conversation. You're not going to end up with a ton of muscle fatigue and then impact your ability to do your strength training, but you're going to get all of the expansion ability of your heart because you're actually able to do that. Your heart is able, with the space of doing zone 2, because you're not going so hard, your body actually has the ability to expand all the way out with the heart, and then do a full contraction. Versus if you're doing zone 3 or zone 4, you can't quite, right? Just think about, like, logically, you're going fast. So you can't, your heart doesn't have the time to expand out quite so big as it's looking to. So trying to stretch it out. And now there's potential, you don't want to stretch it too far. And, there's just like, you don't want to contract it too hard, right? That, aneurysms and things like that. But usually most people without heart issues are fine. And so this is where, if you're thinking about what do I want to do in terms of cardio, the idea is, in a week, if you're getting somewhere between 90 to 120 minutes of working on your heart, with the mentality of, I'm working on my heart right now, that's a really, really solid target. Now, you may not be like, think about somebody who's got a really active job, a nurse or, construction worker, or somebody who does that, who's walking all the time, right? The idea that they're going to walk for a 12-hour shift and then come in and do 45 minutes of cardio is laughable, right? That's not likely going to happen. And also, they are really active. And so again, you're getting a lot of the benefits from it, from doing walking. So the question is, that kind of, again, it's kind of catered person to person. But if you could do whatever, 2 40-minute cardio sessions and then a 10-minute hit, or 35-minute cardio sessions and a 10-minute hit, or you're doing, again, when you think about combat, you're in there for an hour. You're not actually working for an hour, though, right? Like, the songs are going to be different things and whatever, and there's breaks in between, so it might be 35 minutes, 40 minutes out of the hour that you're actually working, and so it's like, okay, there's 35 minutes. Great. Okay. Or the HEAT class that we talk about, which is 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, 12 stations twice around the room. So simple math, 12 stations twice at each station. It's a minute of work times 12 stations is 12 minutes. Twice around is 24 minutes. So that's 24 minutes of cardio. So for ease of math, 24 from HEAT, 36 from, just to match it up nicely, from combat. Now you're at an hour, right? So can you find 30 more minutes to do some zone 2 cardio? Because those are going to both be zone 3, right? And so we're looking for more of the zone 2 piece of it. / you can maybe make HEAT or combat lower zoned if you wanted to, right? By not going quite as intensely, but we usually don't want to.
Right.
Because it's not the context. And so a lot of people talk about, like, is there a best form of this? No. Find one that you can do that's not wicked high stress. Like, for me, I hate running. Like, I hate it with every fiber of my being. So for me, going for a run is, I'm going to probably be in zone 3 no matter how hard I'm running, because I'm just thinking about how pissed I am that I'm running. You know what I mean? Like, versus I'm going to be on a bike or something like that. That might be, or I could do like a faster uphill walk, maybe, that might be able to get me up there, kind of climbing a hill. Something like that might be a hike. Swimming, if you like swimming. For me, swimming would be like zone 5, because I'm basically trying to not drown when I'm swimming. Like, swimming is active not drowning for me. That's what it is at my current stage of life.
Oh, goodness. I have to send you a video of my dog trying to swim. I feel like if we did a side-by-side,
it would probably be accurate. Yeah, it's really rough. I can like swim for 20 seconds before I'm like, little story time. Because it makes sense. Why would we not do this? So in college, my freshman and summer after my freshman and sophomore years of college, I was a camp counselor up at a camp. And
of course you were. Of course you were.
Why wouldn't I be?
Great job.
And so part of the camp, we had a lake, and so you got to, like, all right, all the staff has to pass the swimming test so that you can go and swim with the kids. And it was like just around the buoy. So there was like, it was kind of whatever, the buoy line thing. And I don't know how far this was. I'm not going to say it was short, but it was definitely not long. Okay. And the entire staff did this, basically. Anybody who hadn't been, like my first year, my second year, I didn't have to pass it a second time. But my first year, it was basically anybody who was on staff that had not passed. We all did this together during the week before campers came. And so there's 5 lifeguards. They're all in their, their kayaks, and 30 of us start swimming, right? And I'm going, and I just I get fatigued because I have no swimming endurance whatsoever. And so, and I can't tread water. I've just never figured out how to tread water well at all. And so I would just let myself sink when I started to get tired, just all right, I'm just going to let my arms rest. And then I would kick back off and go and get back up to the surface and go. And I did this 4 or 5 times on this not all that long of a run. I'm gonna ballpark it. It was 150 meters all the way around. If you took the curve of a track, it was that plus another half. It was probably about that length because it was curved. And I got 4 or 5 times, and I got to my 5th time, and I started sinking, and I actually looked up, and I was like, I'm not 100% sure I can get back to the surface right now. I'm just I'm not 100, and I'm looking, and I see the canoes, and I see all the bodies, and I'm like, I don't know if anybody knows I'm down here, to be honest, and I'm not sure I can get back up. And I actually made it. I got all the way to the bottom of the lake, which was not wicked deep at this point, but it was also not
lucky.
This was a nice lake. It was sandy bottom. But I got down there, and it was 15, 18, 20 feet deep. It was not a short distance to the surface. And I'm literally standing on the bottom of the lake looking up, and I'm like, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to make this. And I was like, okay, I got to do I kind of have to, right? Or I'm going to die. That was kind of what it was. And I got back up there, and I looked, and and one of the lifeguards who I had gotten to know a little bit, she looked at me and she's like, I'm like, can I get back up? And she looks at me and she's like, Jeff, are you all right? I'm like, she's like, you're almost there. And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, well, do it, or you can't swim with your campers all summer, and you're going to have to tell them why. And I was like, all right, well, thanks for that. Appreciate that. And I made it. But it was one of those things where I did not really do a lot of swimming with my campers. I just kind of was like, yeah, we'll do other activities together to not die. So I'm a little bit dreading if my kids want to play swimming games with me. When my kids want to play swimming games with me, right now I can do it where I'm standing right in my in-laws pool, but there's a deep end, and we get into the deep end, and I cannot tread water. So I'm either swimming to one, I'm swimming to the point where I can hold onto an edge. That's where I'm at. I'm living on the edge here. I do not live in the middle of the water. I do not like that.
So I picture Phoebe's running.
Yeah,
is your swimming.
it's so no, it looks good. I can make it look good for a minute. Sure. I can make it look good for a minute, but then it's just then I stop, and then it doesn't look bad. I don't doggy paddle. I look like I know what I'm doing, right? I can do the stroke, turn, and look. I can do the whole thing. I can do the breaststroke, and it looks like I know what I'm talking about. My endurance is just zero.
Yeah,
zero endurance. Anyway,
how did we get talking about swimming?
As a form of cardio. So you can pick your cardio type. Yeah. I do not care. But pick the one that you kind of at least can tolerate. There's some that are decent because you can like to multitask too. So read a book or have a call, or you know what I mean? Whatever. Get out of your head a little bit and multitask while you're doing it. Not a bad idea.
I'm a speed walker. That's how I get my.
There you go. Yeah.
My level 2. But it's not on purpose. I'm not setting out with the goal. I'm going to speed walk for an hour. It's I see anyone else on the street and I have to beat them.
Yeah.
And they could not be out for doing anything other than looking at their own flowers. I'm going to beat them.
Look at my big surprise face. That's where you're at. Not at all. Not at all surprised by this. But
I
again,
told you, John and I won the MS walk for charity. Um,
you won the walk for charity. Won it. Just won
it's
that
not
walk.
something you can win, but that's still what we say. And we kept like cutting around people because they were going too
Yeah.
damn slow, and we got there, and the people were like, some people were still leaving to start the walk, and John and I were back. Like, what
Lapping
do we get?
people.
Here
Just
first. And
lapping
we're like,
people.
we don't have anything. This isn't something you can win. This isn't a race. I'm
Yeah,
like,
there are no
we
medals
have
for this. Like the winner are the MS patrons who were trying to help heal. Amy, come on now.
I know. My friend Carol, who has MS, actually, she was like, "So you're proud that you beat me?"
Oh no! Like,
Okay.
you realize that this is a muscular degenerative disorder for which there is no cure.
But
And
also, Carol just ran her 4th marathon, so like
yeah, well,
she's
all right.
fine.
Lock it up, Carol.
She is my hero.
Well, she's probably a lot of people's heroes. But anyway,
Mhm.
so the idea behind these zones is can you get a little bit more in? Can you increase your capacity? And it's just like with strength training. And this is kind of as we'll finish this piece here and then kind of what we're talking about. So when you're talking about strength training, right? How do you measure the effectiveness of your cardio? Right. One, blood pressure is a great, like all of these health measures, your resting heart rate, your blood pressure, all of these things are good indicators of, hey, like we're going in the right direction. But even just from a day to day is like, if you're on a treadmill, as an example, right? Can I go a little bit faster and maintain my same heart rate? As an example. So I have a client right now, and I can say this because I'm very confident that she is not listening to this podcast. So she's a former colleague of mine. She used to teach math with me, and she's about to turn 70, and she wants to run a half marathon. She's run
Solid
a
goal.
10K. She just finished a 10K, and so she's got like 6 months, and she wants to run a half marathon. And so I'm like, we got plenty of runway, right? You can do 6 miles, like you've done 6 miles. We're halfway there, but I want to focus on for her at the beginning because she was saying I can go for a bit, but then I have to like really dial it down. So she basically hops between zone 3 and zone 1. And so I'm like, we're going to try to increase your zone 2 capacity for a bit. It doesn't mean that we're not going to play in zone 3, right? They all have a benefit. Doesn't mean we're not going to play up in zone 4 eventually. Okay. And there is some translating between them. Okay. Like an Olympic sprinter has some aerobic capacity to go run more than the average person. And as does an Olympic long distance runner has some capacity to sprint. All of them have that capability. However, you get better by doing the thing, right? So strength training, I can get better at doing squats by squatting. I can also get better at doing squats by doing split squats or one leg squats or variations on them. Lateral lunges, any of those things are going to help support my squat. But the number one thing I can do is just a squat. The same thing is true of your cardio, right? I'm going to improve my zone 2 cardio by doing zone 2 cardio. I'm going to increase the capacity of my heart by doing zone 2 cardio. That doesn't mean that zone 4 does not have a place. I'm also going to increase my zone 4 capacity by doing zone 4 or zone 2. I'm sorry. Like you're going to increase, there is carryover, but you're going to get best at doing it by doing the thing. And so again, 90 to 120 minutes is the generally accepted. Like, listen, if you're doing, and again, there's practicality versus perfection, right? So we live in a practical world, and I understand this for most people. So this is a lot of, can I do 2 things at once? Can I multitask? This is the walking and listening to a podcast. This is the strength training and getting some cardio, some zone 4 type cardio in by structuring it this way. This is versus just doing strict strength training, which is like I do a set and then I rest, right? Can I get some zone 4-esque cardio in via doing strength training a certain way? Yeah, I can. Can I do some zone 2 cardio with my kids? Like literally, this is like, if people ask me like, when do you do your cardio? I literally, the running around the house with my kids is my zone 2 cardio. It's like planned and part of my life. Because I know at least 3 nights a week, I'm going to do that for 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
At least 3 nights a week, I'm going to do that for 20 minutes. So there's an hour. So this comes back to the conversations we had with walking, which is do the thing with your kids. Do the thing in your life. Like, now, if you're at the gym and you want to, like, one of my coach, Andrew Coates, loves to read and wants to do more cardio. So he reads books while he does cardio.
Mm-hmm.
And you stack the two habits. And it's like two things that are kind of hard to find time for. All right, well, just do them both together.
And it makes you look forward to doing them.
Yeah. Whatever you can do to kind of,
love
but
walking the
find a
treadmill
way
because I
to
can.
not hate it. Find a
Mm-hmm.
way to not hate it. But know that, like,
Mm-hmm.
we do hard things. That's my mantra for my son right now. We do hard things. Like, you can do hard things, but know that the benefits are beyond just the fat loss piece of it. Certainly can help with the fat loss. But the benefits are beyond that. And I'll say this last little bit, because people ask me, like, do I count the steps? Do I, what's the translation between cardio and steps and walking and whatever? Because we talk about the 7 to 10,000 steps. Like, steps are steps. Like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, now, so this is the conversation I had with Laura. Like, if you're getting your 10,000 steps in and you're swapping out 3,000 of those steps from walking to a run, you probably haven't moved the needle drastically, right? That's 50 to 100 calories, maybe. Doesn't mean that it's not worth doing because of your heart health, okay? But you probably haven't drastically moved the needle if you have the same number of steps and just you're doing it differently. In terms of the calories out portion of it, you have moved the needle on your heart health portion of it. If you're doing it in addition to those steps, certainly that's going to be bonus, but that's where you have to be kind of aware of those psychological benefits to it. But again, come back to all of these things. So this is kind of, as I'm going to finish all of this, because this was the most about overall health that there was. All of these things support the fat loss thing, which affects the aesthetics, how we feel when we look in the mirror, how our body is composed, how our clothes fit, our confidence, which very much permeates all of the areas of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You act how you feel. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a great benefit on your overall health. Every single one of these things has a benefit beyond just fat loss.
Yeah.
And their benefits beyond fat loss oftentimes outweigh their benefits for fat loss. Right? Now, a calorie deficit notwithstanding, right? At some point you are not in a calorie deficit. But the idea of why do we lose fat beyond just looking the way that we want to look, which is, again, if that's your primary goal, let it be your primary goal. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But what happens when we lose fat? We improve our health.
Mm-hmm.
We improve our health. And along the way, we start to feel better, not just psychologically, not just, oh, I feel better about my body, but we also start to feel better. You know what happens when you eat more protein? You feel stronger.
Yeah.
You feel more full. You know what happens when you eat more fruits and vegetables? You feel better. Your gut feels better. Your stomach feels better. And you help your colon. You know what happens when you sleep? You recover better and you're more energetic and you know what I mean? What happens when you walk? You relieve your stress and you get outside. And what happens when you strength train? You prevent injuries. Like, muscle is your body's armor against injuries. What happens when you do cardio? You improve your heart health. Like, all of these things that you're doing for fat loss are also impacting your health. And every single one of them, 2 through 7, I said this earlier, I forget which episode, every single one of these 2 through 7, one notwithstanding, 2 through 7, you will do for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
When you achieve your fat loss goal, whatever it is, the only thing that will change is you will go from a calorie deficit into calorie maintenance, or maybe even to a calorie surplus if you're trying to put on a little bit of muscle. That is the only thing that changes. You will still eat protein, you will still eat fiber, you'll still need to sleep, walk, strength train, and do cardio. All of those things happen all of the time because they're the things. So focus on those building blocks. The calorie deficit piece I know we talked about this at the very beginning, but 2 through 7 are, if you're doing those things, you're probably in a calorie deficit. You're
Yeah.
probably there. If you're eating sufficient protein, you're eating sufficient fiber, you're sleeping, you're walking, you're strength training, and you're doing cardio, if you were to track your calories, you're probably at or very close to a calorie deficit. And if you're
Yep.
not, then you're very close to it and you can just make a couple of adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
And then you lose the fat.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal goes far, like so much of the discussion in fitness, and I do it, you have to steer in it because it's what people want. So much of the
Mm-hmm.
discussion in fitness is about fat loss and aesthetics and all these kinds of things. And it's important because it's what people want. Okay. But so many people, and you've experienced this, have spent their entire life with fitness focusing on fat loss. They have
Mm-hmm.
not really, because they've never really achieved it.
Right.
And so it feels like that's constantly the goal. And it's something so incredible when you achieve it and then you realize that was just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the beginning. And I don't want to make light of it, but it's like parenting, you know, like the first moment you hold your kid and you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 years later and you're like, that was just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the coolest moment. And I've been waiting for that my whole life. 9 months. I'm going to be a dad. I'm going to be a mom. Hold my kid, right? And all the thing. You're like, oh my gosh, this is my kid. And you're like, at least for me, I was like, this is a little bit foreign. Like, I know this is my kid, but like, I don't know if I'm like, am I really dad? Like, am I the father? Or, you know, not like, am I the father, but like, am I your dad or you just my kid? You know, like there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that.
Yeah.
But then it develops and then you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so much deeper now. Like I'm way more dad now than I was that first moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we become that much more. It's so much cooler to pursue some things beyond just fat loss once we get there.
Yeah.
Because it's freeing. Because we kind of live in the confines of like, oh, I gotta lose fat. I gotta get leaner. I gotta feel better. And all of a sudden when you're like not pursuing that anymore because you've achieved it or you're like you're good where you're at, you've experienced it, like, oh, I'm gonna get freaking strong as hell. Or
That's what I'm working on.
or I'm gonna like, oh, I can keep up with my kids. Like some of my favorite, one of my favorite stories, and I'll finish with this. One of my clients, his name's Jeff. He's fantastic. Um, he he sent me a note when he went to his family with his family to Disney World, and they go like once a year. And he was like, the difference in me on this vacation versus me on this vacation every other year is unbelievable. Like from a confidence perspective, to like rip my shirt off and go into the pool with my kids, 100%. But also like I'm outlasting them in the pool. We
Mm-hmm.
went gate open to gate close at Disney, and I wasn't tired. I carried all the kids. I did all the things,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt good, and I felt energetic, and I felt dependable. I felt like they could
Mm-hmm.
count on me. And you know,
That's so awesome.
or Phil, who's leaving, he said to me, he's like, my clothes fit better, which is really really cool, but I feel better. Like I can
Mm-hmm.
chase my kids around. I can like get on the floor and put together chairs and not be winded. Like I can just
Yeah.
do life. Like I'm free to do life
Yeah.
because I'm taking care of myself. So fat loss is 100% valid goal, important goal. Pursue it, do all of these things, but know that there's so much more on the other side of it. It's the first step in a lifelong journey of taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun doing this.
I like this little series.
I did too. I have to do more series like this.
Clearly, we're pretty well liked in the pod
Yeah,
sphere as well.
yeah. So all of you, those of you listening, you know, we got our like year wrapped or whatever it was, and we're blowing
Here.
up, blowing up. So we're gonna keep trying to do it. Keep trying to do
We
this
might
thing.
now have 11 listeners. This is like,
No, I forget what the numbers were. Hang on, I'm going to tell it because we'll finish with
you
this.
should. You
I've
should be
said
proud.
we'll finish with this like 7 times, but so we were the top podcast for 10 people, which means we were a top 5 podcast for 21 people, and we were a top 10 podcast for 31 people. Now, what that might tell me is that there's a lot of people who don't listen to a lot of podcasts who listen to our podcast, but that's maybe a little bit pessimistic. I'm going to think that we were the favorite podcast for a lot of people. And so
I mean, it's entirely possible that I am one of those people because I listen to them just to see how much background noise you can hear. Like the one that my dog was in the room, you could just hear her collar and her crying the entire time.
Well, that's how it goes.
It's embarrassing.
That's how it goes. Well, appreciate you guys very much going through this series with us. Excited for new things to come. And continuing on with Amy. And I also am going to be bringing back some guests here as well. So Amy and I will continue to do episodes, but I'll do some kind of bonus things and bring some guests on to talk about some specific things, a la the cardio thing or pain management. And I want to bring on some experts to talk about some specific things and some of the other awesome coaches that I know in the industry. So was spending a lot of time thinking about how I want to do that. And so going to be super focused with those to bring people on to be the experts and try to interview them as best I can.
Love it.
So excited for that as well in the new year. But I think this one is going to come out the last week of the year. So happy holidays for all of you who are listening. And we'll chat with you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I could eat.